Imagine standing in front of an image that feels disturbingly modern. Not a photograph, not a digital render, but a black and white engraving created nearly 300 years ago. You lean in closer, expecting to find imperfections, guesswork, artistic exaggeration. Instead, what you see feels precise, clinical, almost mechanical. Every crack in the stone is exactly where it should be. Every shadow behaves like real light. Every surface has weight, texture, and depth. And that's when the uncomfortable question appears. How is this possible? The artist lived in the 18th century. No cameras, no modern optics, no high-powered lenses, just ink, metal, acid, and the human hand. Yet what he left behind looks less like art and more like forensic documentation. His name was Giovanni Battista Piranesi, and his works have quietly unsettled historians for generations. At first glance, art history offers a neat explanation. Piranesi was a genius, a visionary, a romantic dreamer obsessed with ruins. According to textbooks, he exaggerated scale, dramatized decay, and invented fantasy architecture to evoke emotion. That explanation is comforting, safe, but it collapses the moment you compare his engravings to reality. When modern researchers overlay Piranesi's images with surviving Roman structures, something disturbing happens. The proportions match. The perspectives align. Decorative elements line up down to the smallest detail. Buildings he supposedly imagined turn out to exist, not symbolically, physically. Some damaged, some buried, some altered, but undeniably real. This wasn't fantasy. This was documentation. And once that realization settles in, a far more dangerous line of questioning begins. Because if Piranesi was documenting reality with this level of accuracy, then what exactly was he documenting? The Rome shown in his engravings is not the Rome of postcards and guidebooks. It is not a city gently aging over centuries. It looks like a city that survived something violent, something sudden. Massive structures lie broken as if struck by an overwhelming force. Giant stone blocks are displaced, twisted, scattered, columns snapped, walls torn open. These are not the marks of slow decay. They look like impact damage. Official history blames time, neglect, and barbarian invasions, but that explanation grows weaker the longer you stare. Barbarian armies burned wood, they looted metal, they reused stone. They did not shatter megalithic architecture into fragments weighing dozens of tons. They did not bury entire floors of cities under meters of soil. Yet that is exactly what Piranesi shows us. Look closely at the ground level in his images. Doorways sit half underground, windows open into dirt, staircases descend into nothing. These buildings were clearly designed with lower levels fully exposed, yet by the time Piranesi documented them, those levels were already swallowed by earth. This is not gradual accumulation. Trash and dust do not bury cities evenly to such depths. What we see resembles the aftermath of a sudden geological or hydrological catastrophe, a massive deposition of material, mud, sediment, debris. And Piranesi wasn't alone in recording this reality. Other artists of the same era, Hubert Robert, Giovanni Paolo Panini, depicted the same strange Rome, same buried structures, same colossal ruins dwarfing the people who wander among them. The people are another detail that doesn't fit the official story. In Piranesi's engravings, human figures appear small, fragile, almost misplaced. They wear simple, sometimes ragged clothing. They gather firewood from ruins. They lean against walls that tower over them. They look like squatters, survivors, not builders. The architecture was not made for them. Doorways soar far above human height. Steps are oversized. Ceilings vanish into shadow. Everything feels scaled for something larger. Or at least for a civilization operating under very different assumptions about power, materials, and permanence. The stonework itself raises even more troubling questions. Blocks of travertine and marble fit together so tightly that even today it's impossible to slide a blade between them. There is no mortar, no filler. Ornaments flow seamlessly across multiple blocks as if the stone were carved after assembly or manufactured with machine-level precision. This kind of construction is not supposed to exist in the ancient world, not according to what we are taught. Primitive tools, slave labor, simple engineering. And yet, the evidence carved into the stones says otherwise. These structures were designed to last, and they did. Centuries passed, earthquakes came and went, cities grew around them. Later buildings collapsed, were replaced, vanished entirely. But these megalithic cores remained, indifferent to time, indifferent to history. Which brings us back to Piranesi, because documenting ruins is one thing, but documenting them with such obsessive, almost frightening precision is another. He etched every crack, every chipped edge, every texture of erosion. Not selectively, not romantically, but exhaustively. Why? The answer does not lie in lost cameras or secret photographic technology. The truth is both grounded and more unsettling. Piranesi mastered etching to a level that turned chemistry into a recording instrument. Etching is unforgiving. There are no erasers, no revisions. Each line is scratched into varnish-covered copper, then bitten into metal by acid. Every mistake is permanent, every decision final. Piranesi used multi-stage etching, repeatedly immersing the plate in acid, selectively protecting areas, deepening shadows, building layers of depth that no simple drawing could achieve. The result was an image with almost tactile realism. Light behaves correctly, stone feels heavy, space feels vast. But technique alone does not explain obsession, because Piranesi didn't just depict ruins, he emphasized destruction. He highlighted buried foundations. He drew attention to structural scars. He returned again and again to certain sites as if compelled to understand them. One structure in particular haunted him, a massive cylindrical fortress on the banks of the Tiber River. Today, we call it Castel Sant'Angelo. Officially, it is Hadrian's mausoleum, built in the 2nd century, a tomb that became a fortress. But Piranesi's engravings tell a more troubling story. He focuses on the foundation, on the enormous stone platform beneath the visible structure, on blocks so massive and precisely fitted that they resemble the polygonal masonry found in the oldest sites on Earth, sites whose origins remain unexplained. The base looks older than Rome, older than the empire, as if the Romans inherited it rather than built it. Inside, he carefully records lifting bosses carved into stones weighing tens or hundreds of tons, details that imply the use of advanced cranes or machinery, not ropes, not wooden scaffolding. This was not primitive construction, this was engineering. And this building endured everything: sieges, earthquakes, alterations. While cities fell, it remained. Piranesi seems to understand this. His engravings quietly insist on it. He draws the underground levels, the thickness of the walls, the impossibility of destruction. He is not exaggerating. He may even be understating what he saw, trying to make it believable to his contemporaries. Which raises a final, deeply uncomfortable thought. What if Piranesi knew exactly what he was doing? What if these engravings were not just art, but warnings, evidence, a message etched into metal because paper and memory are too fragile? Once he said, "I make the stones speak," and perhaps they were trying to tell us something we were never meant to forget. In Part 2, we'll go deeper into the catastrophe itself. What kind of force could bury cities, shatter megaliths, and erase an advanced civilization from history while leaving its stone skeleton behind? And why does so much evidence suggest this happened far later than we are told? If the ruins Piranesi documented were the result of a catastrophe, then the next question becomes unavoidable. What kind of catastrophe leaves cities standing, yet buried? What kind of force shatters stone but doesn't erase it? What kind of disaster interrupts a civilization so completely that its descendants appear to have forgotten who built the world around them? The damage Piranesi recorded doesn't resemble slow decline. It doesn't look like war, looting, or neglect. Instead, it looks abrupt, violent. In some places, entire walls are torn apart as if pulled outward from within. In others, massive blocks lie displaced, rotated, or stacked unnaturally as though gravity briefly lost its authority. This is not how cities decay. This is how they are hit. Consider the sheer scale of the materials involved. Many of the stones depicted weigh tens, sometimes hundreds of tons. Even today, moving such blocks requires heavy machinery, planning, and coordination. To imagine them being casually displaced by human hands strains credibility. To imagine them being destroyed by primitive weapons is impossible. Yet we see them broken. The official explanation tends to lean on a familiar narrative: barbarians, invasions, chaos, the collapse of order. But this explanation dissolves when confronted with physics. Fire does not pulverize stone. Swords do not fracture granite. Rage does not scatter megaliths like gravel. If we take the damage seriously, we are forced to consider natural forces: earthquakes, floods, tsunamis, mud flows, events capable of reshaping landscapes in hours, not centuries. And here, another detail in Piranesi's engravings becomes impossible to ignore: the soil. Across his works, the ground level appears unnaturally high. Entire lower floors are missing beneath earth. Columns emerge from dirt halfway up their shafts. Windows sit below street level, sealed by compacted sediment. Modern archaeology confirms this pattern. When excavations take place in Rome and other ancient cities, they often uncover streets, buildings, and infrastructure buried meters below the current surface. These are not primitive layers. These are finished floors, decorative facades, fully functional spaces. The question is not whether this burial happened. It clearly did. The question is how. Gradual accumulation is the standard explanation. Centuries of trash, rebuilding, and collapse slowly raising the ground level. But this theory struggles under scrutiny. Trash does not bury cities evenly. Cultural layers are messy, uneven, filled with artifacts. What we see instead is consistent, dense sediment, earth that behaves more like a deposited layer than a buildup. This points toward a large-scale inundation, water carrying massive amounts of material, a flood or mud flow capable of pouring into urban spaces, filling streets, burying lower levels, and then retreating, leaving cities half entombed. Such events are not hypothetical. They occur, but rarely on a continental scale. And yet, similar buried architecture appears not only in Rome, but across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Different cultures, different climates, same pattern. Lower floors underground, monumental stone structures surviving while lighter constructions vanish. This suggests not a local disaster, but something far larger. If such a catastrophe occurred, it would explain another disturbing feature of Piranesi's engravings: the people. They do not behave like heirs to a fallen empire. They behave like survivors. They live among ruins without understanding them. They repurpose ancient halls as shelters, barns, storage spaces. They build flimsy wooden structures against indestructible stone walls. This is not continuity. This is occupation.
The knowledge gap is obvious. Whoever built these structures understood stone at a level that even modern engineers struggle to replicate. Whoever lived among them later did not. Civilizations do not usually forget core technologies overnight. Skills are passed down, adapted, modified, unless something interrupts that transmission completely. A collapse so severe that it erases not just cities, but institutional memory, engineering traditions, scientific frameworks. The engravings suggest we are looking at the aftermath of such a break. Which brings us to the uncomfortable possibility that what we call ancient Rome may already have been ancient to the people Piranesi depicted. This idea challenges the linear model of history, the comforting narrative of steady progress from primitive to advanced. Instead, it suggests cycles, rises and falls, periods of high technology followed by catastrophic resets. And here is where Piranesi's work becomes truly dangerous. Because he did not just document ruins, he created a visual language that made them impossible to dismiss. His engravings are too precise to be myths, too consistent to be fantasies, too detailed to be symbolic. They look like evidence. This evidence had consequences. Piranesi's images spread across Europe, captivating monarchs, architects, and thinkers. They did not see decay, they saw power, permanence, monumentality. Napoleon studied these engravings obsessively. To him, they were proof that true authority could be carved into stone, that empires could transcend time if built correctly. Catherine the Great of Russia was equally captivated. She wanted her empire to look eternal, indestructible, Roman. And so she imported not just architects, but ideas. The result was St. Petersburg, a city whose aesthetic feels strangely ancient despite its relatively recent origin. Granite embankments, massive columns, severe geometry, ornamentation lifted directly from Piranesi's visual vocabulary. Walk its streets, and you are, in a sense, walking through Rome as Piranesi imagined it, or remembered it. This is not coincidence. Architectural historians have noted direct citations from his engravings, decorative motifs copied almost line for line, entire spatial concepts transplanted from copper plates to stone. Ideas, once etched, became blueprints. Which raises another question. Why were rulers so eager to replicate this style? Why did it resonate so deeply? Perhaps because it represented something lost, something powerful, something that made modern achievements feel small by comparison. Piranesi's ruins do not celebrate decay, they mourn interruption. They show a world that reached extraordinary heights only to be shattered, a civilization whose engineering mastery exceeded that of its supposed successors. And this is where mainstream history grows uneasy. Because if these structures were not built by the Romans as we imagine them, then who built them, and when? Polygonal masonry appears in Peru, Italy, Greece, Egypt. Identical techniques, identical precision, no clear technological lineage connecting these cultures. Either multiple civilizations independently invented the same advanced stoneworking methods, then all forgot them, or there was a shared knowledge base far older than recorded history. Piranesi's engravings don't answer these questions, but they refuse to let us ignore them. He repeatedly highlights the underground portions of structures. He draws cross-sections, foundations, structural reinforcements. He shows us what we are not supposed to notice. It's almost as if he is saying, look here, look deeper, look below the surface. The surface narrative is comfortable, barbarians, time, romance. The buried narrative is not. And yet, it is written in stone. Which leads us to the final thread we must pull, the purpose of Piranesi's obsession. Because by the end of his life, his work becomes darker, more dramatic, more monumental. His famous Prisons series abandons realism altogether and plunges into psychological space. Endless staircases, crushing scale, claustrophobic infinity. Some see this as fantasy, others see it as metaphor. But perhaps it is neither. Perhaps it reflects the realization that humanity is trapped inside the ruins of its own forgotten past, living among structures it did not create, benefiting from knowledge it no longer understands. Piranesi etched not just architecture, but a warning that civilizations can rise to unimaginable heights, that they can master stone, space, and matter, and that they can fall so completely that their descendants argue about whether they ever existed at all. In Part 3, we will confront the most unsettling question of all. Why is this story not taught? Why is so much physical evidence dismissed, reclassified, or ignored? And what does that mean for how we understand our own civilization today? If the evidence is carved into stone, etched into metal, and buried beneath our feet, then the final question is unavoidable.
Why don't we talk about it? Why are these details treated as curiosities instead of clues? The answer is not a single conspiracy or hidden group pulling strings in the shadows. It is something far more mundane and far more powerful: institutional inertia. Once a historical narrative is established, entire academic structures form around it. Textbooks, careers, museums, funding. Challenging the foundation threatens everything built on top of it. It is easier to call Piranesi a dreamer than to admit that his works don't fit the timeline. It is easier to label his ruins as romantic exaggeration than to explain why those same ruins still exist, buried exactly as he drew them. History, like architecture, is built in layers, and once a layer hardens, digging beneath it becomes uncomfortable. Mainstream archaeology prefers continuity, gradual development, incremental progress. These models are predictable, safe. They allow the past to feel manageable. But Piranesi's engravings don't show continuity. They show interruption, a sharp break between the builders and the inhabitants, between those who understood stone and those who merely occupied it. This is why the lower floors are rarely discussed, why buried windows are dismissed as anomalies, why polygonal masonry is classified as mysterious but irrelevant. Because once you accept that a highly advanced civilization could vanish, you must also accept that ours is not immune. Piranesi forces us to confront impermanence. His ruins are not symbols of decay, they are evidence of resilience. Stone endures, knowledge does not. Empires collapse, languages disappear, technologies are forgotten, but walls remain, standing silently, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. And perhaps that is exactly what Piranesi was doing, asking questions with a needle and acid when words were insufficient. He understood that paper rots, memory fades, but metal lasts. Each engraving is a data storage device, a compressed record of a world that official history struggles to explain. Every line is deliberate, every shadow meaningful. He did not invent these structures, he measured them, he recorded them, he preserved them at the exact moment when they were already being absorbed by Earth and reinterpreted by history. This makes him not a romantic artist, but something far more dangerous, a witness. And witnesses are inconvenient. Because once you see what he saw, you can't unsee it. You start noticing buried floors everywhere, oversized architecture in cities supposedly built by primitive societies, stonework so precise it mocks our assumptions. You begin to realize that history might not be a straight line, but a series of peaks and collapses, that progress can be lost, that civilization is fragile, no matter how advanced it appears. This realization changes how you view the modern world. We assume our skyscrapers, satellites, and digital networks make us superior. But remove electricity, remove supply chains, remove knowledge transfer. How long would it take before our cities become ruins, misunderstood by those who come after? Piranesi's Rome may not be ancient history. It may be a warning from a previous cycle. And the stones are still speaking. They speak through buried streets uncovered by accident, through foundations deeper than necessary, through architectural feats we explain away instead of explaining. The question is not whether a lost civilization existed. The question is how many times this has already happened. Piranesi didn't leave us answers, he left us instructions. Look closely, measure, compare, question. Do not accept authority blindly. Do not dismiss inconsistencies as coincidence. Do not confuse familiarity with truth. Because history is not written by those who build the greatest structures. It is written by those who survive long enough to explain them. And sometimes, those explanations are wrong.
If this investigation unsettled you, that's a good sign. Discomfort is where understanding begins. There are countless details left unexplored, structures ignored, evidence buried in plain sight. This story does not end here. If you want to continue asking uncomfortable questions, if you want to see the images that never make it into textbooks, if you want to explore the gaps between official timelines and physical reality, then this is only the beginning. Join the discussion, share your perspective, look at your own city differently. And the next time you walk past an old building, ask yourself a simple question. Who really built this? And what happened to them? Because the stones remember, and they are still waiting for us to listen.